So we have Kiah, and she identifies as she, they pronouns, and she studied comparative religion and political science at Concordia University. And they've been involved in several harm reduction initiatives, working with organizations like the Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy. We heard about CSSDP, which Daniel was mentioning earlier, is the Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy, and they have a Get Sensible initiative that they run, the Heart and Tattoo Society, the Cannabis and Mental Health Project, and Leading the Tides of Change, the South Surrey White Rock Community Action Team. And she continues to lead work rooted in community to reduce barriers around drug education and harm reduction for all. And joining them today is Heath, whose pronouns are they, them, and who is a youth mental health activist and public speaker and person with lived experience of drug use and mental illness. Their work emphasizes that young people are autonomous individuals with complex needs and uniquely valuable insights. I think we all on this call will very much agree with that. And all of whom have an equal right to health service and evidence-based information, free of judgment, stigma, or shame. So I will turn it over to you.
All right. So as mentioned, we're here to talk a little bit about the work that we've done on the Get Sensible campaign. And we'll just get right into it. And we'll take a moment to introduce ourselves when we get there. But before we start, we do like to take a moment to introduce our Indigenous Solidarity Statement. We have a little QR code at the top. It might be small. I don't know if you want to, you can scan it with your phone and it'll bring you to the full statement, as well as a list of additional Indigenous-led cannabis harm reduction resources. Rather than a land acknowledgement, we do a solidarity statement that acknowledges more so the impacts, the historical impacts that drug policy has had on Indigenous communities, both in Canada, on Turtle Island, and globally, as well as reflect on what we are trying to do as an organization to decolonize our approach a little bit, which includes having an anti-oppressive approach, having a commitment to decrim and drug user liberation, as well as incorporating trauma-informed approaches, harm reduction, and a commitment to learning and listening. Because sometimes that is the best thing that you can do, is recognize when you're not an authority to speak on something and listen to the folks who are, as well as taking care of each other is a big thing for us. My name is Heath. I use any pronouns. As Lauren had mentioned, I am an activist and an educator, a facilitator, and I've been working in the cannabis space for over 10 years now and have been with CSSDP and the Get Sensible project for a large portion of that time. And I'll hand it over to my co-presenter, Kiah, for a moment.
Thank you so much, Heath, and thanks for having us today, Lauren. We always love yapping about Get Sensible. So my name is Kiah. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a young person of lived experience, and yeah, I've been a part of, I guess, like the CSSTP network for 6, 7 years now. I've been so fortunate to have been able to work with Heath so closely for the past 3 years on the Get Sensible project. And yeah, we're just really passionate about what we do. So we're excited to share today. Thank you.
Amazing. And while we're very excited to be here, we do want to acknowledge that all of the work that Get Sensible does is supported by a large community of young people, which means that any of the resources we've created, the illustrations that you see, the web development, our website, any social media posts and video content has been all created by and for young people. And it's a big way that we kind of commit to meaningful youth engagement, is by working almost exclusively with young people, many of whom have lived experience and identify as young people who use drugs. A bit of a background, as was mentioned, Get Sensible is a project by Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy. It started pre-legalization with a series of youth-led roundtables to address the needs of young people coming out of cannabis legalization and to answer the questions that we weren't being asked by government consultations and the like. And some of the major pillars of our campaign include having an evidence-based approach, incorporating harm reduction and lived experience, our commitment to youth-led peer-to-peer initiatives, and ensuring that all of our resources are accessible, representative, and intersectional, as well as fun and engaging. Because a lot of the evidence that we have looked at and that informs us is pushing us away from fear-based models to those that are more engaging and warm and non-stigmatizing. And you'll see on the side some of our resources, our educational booklet series, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The evidence that informs all of the work that we do emphasizes the importance of youth-led approaches and strategies when it comes to drug education, and an increasing shift towards very active youth engagement, interactive learning opportunities, presenting evidence-based and unbiased information that is also balanced in the way that it talks about both the potential perceived benefits and harms associated with cannabis use. Once again, harm reduction, as well as including broader and multifaceted strategies. So going beyond just presenting like the facts about drugs to also promote skill building and decision making among young people, personal development, stress management, and acknowledging some of the overlap between cannabis use, mental health, as well as like larger social contexts that young people might be living in. Which brings me to our next point, which is while evidence informs all of what we do, another huge thing that guides us is the origins of harm reduction as a social movement. And while it's become quite mainstream as a concept, both in research and in clinical settings, we think it's important to recognize that the origins of harm reduction are as like a radical social movement where communities that were often underserved by government systems came together to address the gaps that they were experiencing. Often these were underserved communities, including people who use drugs, sex workers, people who are racialized, and queer and trans people. A big like influence in that was the HIV and AIDS crisis, but there are plenty of other examples that point to the origins of harm reduction being not just limited to substance use, but also extending as far as sexual health harm reduction and reproductive rights, housing and food insecurity, and also just acknowledging the harms not associated strictly with those activities, but also with the systems that regulate them. And that is part of what we believe makes our campaign so effective with young people, is that while we acknowledge the public health considerations, we also make sure that those are situated within the social context. And a lot of the young people that we work with are very socially minded young people. And it seems like the information tends to land whenever it is also connected to social movements and social causes that are really important to them, and also pushes them to then like rep these social causes. Some of the ways that we kind of mimic social activism in our knowledge mobilization strategies are that we collaborate often with artists from the communities that we're working with. So we engage a lot of young people who use drugs to create our resources, to do our illustrations. And then when it comes to actually mobilizing the resources they're associated with, their communities and their friends are really excited to then share them within their communities. These are some examples that were created by a young person with lived experience that we worked with to create a series of stickers. Stickers are another great and very effective way that young people like to like rep the campaign and kind of flag to their communities that they are passionate about substance use, harm reduction, as well as like education. And it's a great conversation starter. It works really well for us. People seem to love it. And it's not just limited to like our stickers and our merch and our branding, but it's also very obvious in our resources as well that they were made by and for young people, in how kind of fun and flashy they are and how much they grab people's attention and how much more likely people are to want to share them with each other as well. This kind of started when we got our funding from the Substance Use and Addictions Program from Health Canada to redesign our booklet series to make them more engaging and to distribute them more widely. So we took our large booklet and we split it into 3 smaller, more accessible, more targeted booklets. And then also took those and made them even smaller by creating our tearaway resources that were more targeted and specific and presented in language that young people who use drugs use when they are speaking to each other. When we talk about like our guide to not greening out and our bong water checkpoint. And these are available not only in print, available on our website, but we post them digitally on our Instagram and our social media as well. The bong water checkpoint was a big hit because everyone was like tagging their friends, being like, change your bong water, do it now. And then also we love collaborating with other organizations, including the Canadian Public Health Association. We had a collaboration with them, which Kiah will talk about a little bit later, as well as the Cannabis and Mental Health Project to create more like specific resources to serve the needs of other organizations that are working within the cannabis or substance use space. Yeah, these are some photos of people engaging with our toolkit in the wild. It's split up into three. Cannabis in Context is the most general overview of like emerging evidence and research on cannabis. It's kind of the one for everyone. Cannabis 101 and Harm Reduction is the one that's more tailored and targeted towards young people who are or may use cannabis. And then the Guiding Principles of Education is the one that's more for allies, which could include parents or educators, to give them more tools that they might need to actually have these conversations with young people. We need to walk the walk as well. If we're like touting these principles as effective, like we certainly employ them in our approach and strategies as well. Here's an overview of some of them, including evidence-based information. We've said it once, we'll say it again. Evidence is very important for us to ground our work in, as well as just to be like a trusted resource and to be taken seriously as like a youth-led campaign as well. But also incorporating, as was mentioned, as Dan had mentioned in his presentation, like non-judgmental and open dialogue, including interactive approaches. Our Instagram lives and our like social media and our in-person outreach is great for that, as well as delivery by a trained facilitator or peer. That's part of our peer-to-peer approach. It is one of the more effective approaches, but there are many others. One that we definitely are moving away from is approaches that rely on like fear of authority to deliver health information, such as engaging with the police and cops. It is not shown to be particularly effective. But you'll see as well, some of these are higher up and they're bolded. Some of the ones closer towards the end are ones that we aren't necessarily the best position to employ because you aren't always going to hit all 10 of the principles. Everyone is positioned differently. The ones about, starting education earlier with age appropriate content, we see as being very important, but it's not necessarily one that we're the best position to do because we are a youth-led campaign for transition aged youth who are more like maybe at most 14, but more so like 18 to 25 or 30. As well as ongoing education opportunities. That's one of the limitations in being an online campaign. Like we don't get to deliver as much like programming within like schools, for example. But yeah, as well as meaningful inclusion, we've talked about that the whole time, and like ensuring that we're offering information that's tailored to specific context and intersectional, such as having conversations or making resources that are explicitly for like queer and trans young people or disabled young people or Black youth as well, which we'll talk about. But we also have our harm reduction principles as well, which I'll hand it over to my colleague Kiah to talk about a little bit.
Thank you, Heath. So yeah, as Heath was mentioning, one of the cannabis education toolkits is the Cannabis 101 harm reduction booklet. And in that booklet, you'll see the 10 principles of cannabis harm reduction, the Get Sensible approach highlighted in that booklet. In 2024, just last year, we actually updated all of the booklets. So the booklet that kind of talks about emerging research, we've updated just to make sure that everything is really relevant, as well as the harm reduction principles. So we have 10 that we highlight, but understanding that harm reduction can look so many different kind of ways and that it's very personal to each person, but these are our recommendations. So we have the classic start low and go slow, which I think is just something everyone should employ. And then set and setting, which is really huge. So the time and place that someone might be considering using cannabis. Are you in a comfortable space? Who are you with? What time is it? Is it in the morning? Should you maybe wait till the evening? Stuff like that. As well as knowing what's in your products and where they come from. This one is really huge, especially just in conversations around understanding your source. Are you getting it from a legal source or an illegal source? Understanding that when we're talking with young people who use cannabis across the country, there's different legal ages for accessing cannabis. So understanding where it's coming from and the risk of getting it from a non-legal cannabis retailer. And then as well as what's in your products. Do you know the dosing? Are you using an oil? Like, do you know how it would affect your body? Things like that. One of my favorites is checking in regularly with yourself about your relationship with cannabis, and just really what Heath was talking about, like giving young folks the tools to feel autonomous and also the ability to slow down and really consider how cannabis might be affecting them. And then, yeah, we have a lot of other harm reduction principles that we encourage you to check out. So as Heath mentioned, we initially started out, so we were initially funded by Health Canada's Substance Use and Addictions program, and the initial focus was on cannabis education. So that's where we created the three cannabis booklets. But in more recent years, we've really taken the fundamentals of our approach at Get Sensible with educating young people on substance use health, and we've expanded it to other substances beyond cannabis. So we teamed up with CPHA, the Canadian Public Health Association, to create resources for healthcare providers on how they can better their interactions with young people who may or may not be using substances. So we created three resources. We created a best practices checklist. And this one is really cool because it's a tool that healthcare practitioners can use. And the first thing on the checklist is checking your own internal bias, which I love. And then we also have that purple zine that was created by our other leaders, Hunter and Noor, and that's for young people who are engaging with the medical system and how to feel, more safe, more comfortable interacting with healthcare providers. And then we have the What We Heard report, which is an outcome report of everything we did. So we interviewed healthcare practitioners, we circulated a survey, and then also did roundtables with healthcare providers. And then we did the same for young people who use drugs that interact with the medical sphere. So this was really, really great. I really recommend checking out the What We Heard report. There's beautiful illustrations in there by young artists in Montreal. Creating conversations, as Heath mentioned, we have a lot. We've done a lot. We've done like Instagram lives. We also have a live Discord. So there's an online community of young people who are into harm reduction, maybe using cannabis, maybe are just allies. And then we've been able to host in-person events like Drug Tales, which is a open mic where people can share their substance use related stories. And then CSSDP has a really great podcast called Drug Buds as well. Our socials. So Heath also mentioned this. Social media is one of the main ways that we engage and interact with young people as well as do outreach. So our Instagram's like our main hub, I would say. And it's been really fun. And then we also have a TikTok. And a YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel has amazing conversations with experts and people with lived experience who are also experts. So we have one with Akwazi, who's a great, great person, and talking about knowing your rights as a young person who uses cannabis or might be holding cannabis, as well as one on polysubstance use, because that is a very real topic when it comes to young people who are using cannabis. And then his conversations with Black youth, and many more. And we also have, highlighting the podcast in our Facebook page as well. More in-person engagements. I believe it was 2021, Heath. Heath went on tour with Sean, who was one of the project leads with Get Sensible, and they went around Canada and did pop-up hangouts where we'd share resources with young people and provide food. And then, of course, different open mic events that we've been able to host. I'm trying to be mindful of time, also, Lauren. So we'll try and get through it.
Yes, I was just gonna say also because this is like a great example of like the harm reduction principle, like meeting people where they're at, but like
Yeah.
taking that so far as to be like, where are kids smoking weed? How can we go there and talk to them? Anyway. Oh,
Oh.
whoa, I went so far ahead. We're not being that mindful of time. Sorry, guys. Oh my God. 1 second. Okay.
Um, yeah, and then another way of meeting young people where they're at is posters. So I know he talked about how much folks really love stickers, and I think stickers are a really effective way of, relaying a message, but also finding fun ways that go beyond a booklet, beyond zines, to really display information in a fun and interactive way. So we've been working on posters over the last couple years. So we have this one that was created by Selena in our content creative team. So packing for a trip, essentials for safer smoking. And then we also have this one that I love that Heath created, the Please Don't Do Coke or Ket Alone in the Bathroom, and just, having ways to reduce the risk of overdose. So we've been sharing this with different venues in our cities. Heath is in Montreal and I'm based in Vancouver, BC. So, going to our local haunts and putting these posters up. And then we also have posters and activities for festivals. So like festival bingo, and it's a fun way to just interact and create conversations around harm reduction and substance use health that isn't super like clinical or top down. It's like, okay, let's do a bingo together. And it creates more conversation among young people and just people in general.
Yeah, we're gamifying harm reduction by having people reward themselves if they drink water because it works, I guess.
Yeah. And then our most recent project, and this one's super exciting to share. So last year we got funding from the Ontario cannabis stores to create a series of public service announcements. And this has been really cool. Heath and I have been leading it, and then we also hired a team of young content creators in Ontario and different regions in the province. So we've created posters as well as short kind of vignette PSAs. And our idea behind the PSAs is really to riff off of the old PSAs that we see from like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. So you can see these posters here kind of arc back to Smokey the Bear. And camping in the outdoors because everyone knows Smokey the Bear. We love him. But yeah, I'm gonna pass it off to Heath to talk a little bit more about the PSAs.
So one of the big things that we did in the past year was that we got funding to make a like a video series because also from the work that we've done with young people and also just like in our own experience as like people who are on the cusp of Gen Z but are like almost millennials, it's the debate is up. I don't know. Video content and like short form video content is like really what young people are engaging with the most, as well as like retro throwback stuff. And then that way it kind of also appeals to like young people and their parents and can be like a great like kind of like way to kind of bridge that gap, which is one of the, guiding principles of education or like to, support open parent-child dialogues. So we have some examples of the videos. So we will play one. This one is a banger. It's our most viewed one, but we're not going to watch it because it's too long. But it's if you want to see it, there's a song. It's on our YouTube channel at Get Sensible, Get_Sensible on YouTube. You should watch it. But we're going to show this one in which Kiah stars. So we'll play this one.
This is yours. It's not coming through. Oh,
Oh, your mother said she found it in the recycling. Maybe one of the neighbors must have. Most of what? Look, it's not mine. Who taught you how to do this? You know how bad this is for you? There's so many chemicals in pot pans. There's safer ways to use pot. Let's talk about it.
Families that talk to each other learn from each other.
This message is brought to you by Get Sensible. For more information, go to getsensible.org.
As you can see, that's one of the examples of the videos. I'm going to play this one also, and it just shows like the parody because parody like comedy videos is also like part of it. It was like kind of spoofing, as Kiah mentioned, like actual old PSAs. So this is an example of like the PSA that it's parodying on. You may have seen.
It's yours?
Yeah,
Your mother said she found it in your closet.
I don't know. When I died, Miss
Close to what?
Look, Dad, it's
Where
not.
did you get it?
Dad,
Answer me. Who taught you how to do this stuff?
you all right? I learned it by watching you.
Parents who use drugs have children who use drugs.
So as you can see, horribly stigmatizing to the point where like most of the young people that we watched it with were like, it is like stigmatizing but it's also like almost funny how unrelatable it is. Like how like when anyway. So we take that and then we do a reimagining of like what that would look like in a modern context and like if we had maybe done a better job where like young people were actually able to engage with their parents and like healthy productive dialogues that responded with like care and compassion, and then rather than like the twofold shame of like the child substance use and also the parent substance use. So yeah, we have others, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna recommend that you check out the YouTube channel. We also made a short film, but it's not out yet, so you can't watch it. You can only see the trailer. It's a parody of Reefer Madness, but instead it's like following like a couple of like similarly like Gen Z millennial cusp youth friend, like a stoner friend group from high school getting together in like adulthood and then reflecting on their how their relationships with each other and their cannabis use has changed over time, and talking about their mental health and like portraying like enacting the cannabis harm reduction principles that we talk about, so we can like be like, they're talking about dosing and this and whatever. I don't know, Kiah, if there's anything that I missed.
I think that was beautiful. Yeah, the short film's going to be really cool because it really highlights how your relationship with cannabis and just your relationship with anything can change over time. And the short film really highlights that, with some people are using cannabis for the first time, other people have stopped using cannabis because they might have had cannabis-induced psychosis or just adverse experiences with weed. So excited to share that one. But yeah, I think that's perfect. Thanks for letting us share. And I guess yeah.
Thanks is all ours to both of you for all of the work that you have been doing. And when I met them, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys have been leading the way. And I think we're way further behind in the medical space because so much of the education has focused really, or maybe hasn't necessarily focused as much on the, specific medical indications in like, very sick children with epilepsy and cancer and all of those things. And so I think it's really interesting, and hopefully we can learn a lot from you all about how we share our evidence